The death of the state system is the linchpin of what I'm saying and what I've been saying about how we will accomplish the remigration of millions and millions of civilians from our lands, not just us in England and Britain, but also in European countries as well. Now, I'm encouraged to see that more and more people are coming to the conclusion that the system will break down. There'll be some kind of system collapse before we're able to vote our way out of the mess we're in. And I think people are starting to say we need to look towards collapse and to start building towards that. What I find that people are still doing is assuming that the state system, the coercive state system, will continue, and we'll simply replace it. Perhaps we'll build a mini-state system that grows and grows, and then we'll replace the current defunct, decadent state with a better state run by better people along better lines for us rather than against us. What I'm saying is we're going to see the death of the state system itself, that the overarching coercive state will disappear. It will go and be replaced by a more consensual, voluntary type of system where you opt into it on an individual basis, which gains its authority not because every country, every nation must have a state in order to impose order, but gains its authority because of the numbers of people who voluntarily want to submit to it in order to be able to live with other people safely and to be able to continue to make a living. That is what I think will happen. Now, if I back up a bit, I think this is unfamiliar. That makes it difficult for people to take in, really, because it seems so strange. I don't think it is that strange once you get it. The idea is you just vote, you join a system because you vote with your feet. You don't vote at the ballot box. And because it's unfamiliar, I think people mistake what I'm saying about remigration. I think, or if I go through what I'm not saying that the millions of foreigners in our countries will go simply because the state breaks down. They'll wake up, the state's broken down, oh, we'd better leave then. I don't think they're going to do that for a minute. No way. I don't think that they'll do it because the welfare state breaks down. I don't think most of the invaders, the foreigners in our land, I think it's a myth that they're here purely for welfare. I think they're here to make a living they could never possibly dream of making in their countries of origin. That they can come here and earn money and send home out of spare money twice what they could earn if they stayed at home in their home countries. I don't think they're going to go simply because the state breaks down and we'll suddenly feel free to say how much we dislike their presence. They know how much we dislike their presence, and they dislike us. They don't care that we dislike their presence. That is not going to cause them to leave. None of those things will cause them to go. What I'm saying, if I get, are a number of things. First, if I take them in order. Firstly, I think the economy will break down. I think we're just starting to see the initial prelude of that with the mess that this current government has made with its budget. There's really no room for manoeuvre for them, and so anything they do, and they're determined to do a lot, will do harm. So I think the economy will break down. When that happens, I think the state authority, the state will break down, and the welfare state will break down, because if the state goes broke, it can't pay welfare. If the welfare state breaks down, then I think the state itself will break down, because I think we will be filled with panic and anger and confusion, and the state won't be able to contain it because the state won't have the money to contain it. We won't be able to pay the forces of law and order to contain that public panic. I think also we will simply reject the authority of the state. We see the state as having authority precisely because of its ability to make promises about welfare and about managing the economy. If it's no longer able to do that, I think we will simply withdraw our consent to be governed by the state, and I think the state will then go down. If the state authority goes down, then I think we will see crime and disorder exploding. Fifth, if that happens, if you see crime and disorder exploding, I think that people will rush to seek the protection of the law and they'll have to do it voluntarily because the state won't be there to impose law coercively. And so I think people will then join self-governing legal codes as long as they're able to codify law and then enforce it. And the type of system that I think people will join will be, there could be a number. People might rush to the protection of gang lords, warlords, rogue colonels, theocrats. But I think that by far the system that most people will prefer is transparent, procedural law that we're used to, predictable law that you know what you have to do and what you don't have to do in order to stay out of trouble. And people will join systems like that people join voluntarily, like a club where we each agree that we can be punished if we don't treat other people in accordance with the rules of that club, i.e. the law of that charter or that legal system that we join. And that in effect is a legal system that people vote for with their feet, not with the ballot. Now this is a bit difficult to grasp, but I think it will come, and I think we will need it. And the sooner we grasp it, the easier it will be to get to grips with it when the time comes. Just think of a club that you join, just think of the society you live in as a club you join, and there are rules that you have to observe in your treatment of each other. And those rules are the law, criminal law and civil law, governing contracts. And so I think it's important for us to be able to get to grips with it early. 6, I think that in those circumstances, if law is simply voluntary, something you join on an individual consensual basis, then I think that will be accompanied by complete freedom of association and non-association. So we'll be able to say, I choose to associate with people who look, act, think and speak like me. I choose not to associate. I only want to join a system that excludes people who don't look, act and think like me, effectively. I think that's the kind of freedom of association we will have. I think there's a kind of freedom of association that we will need. And secondly, the second thing, a condition that I think will come out of this will be having to rely on ourselves for our own security and our own ability to make a living and our safety from crime and invasion, i.e. no umbrella state making a whole lot of false promises to take care of us. We won't be able to rely on that umbrella state. And I think those two things are crucial: complete freedom of association and having to rely on our own metal for our own security, because those two things taken together mean that we will make very sober, very rational decisions about whether we want to tolerate the presence of foreigners within our society. 7, I think in those circumstances people will wise up fast, and the result will be that society will separate out fast and hard along ethnic and racial lines, because you will need to be able to put your trust in your neighbours, the other people who are members of the system that you have opted to join. You will need to trust them with your safety and security. And I don't think any ethnic English person will trust the foreigners, the 57 varieties in this country, to help secure our safety and protection any more than the farmer would trust the fox to guard the hen house. So 8th, I think then we will see quite congested, quite small foreigner dominated areas as society separates out along ethnic lines. And I think those foreigner areas, when they're deprived of contact with the productive English population, I think the conditions in those areas will plummet fast. They won't have any self-starting form of wealth creation, any sources of civil society, no welfare, no way to make money or create sustenance, no way to maintain essential services like gas, electricity, water and drainage. And within weeks, I think those areas will become hellish and disease-ridden. And those conditions will cause, 9th, on the back of that, I think those conditions will cause foreign people to want to leave our country voluntarily, because they will find themselves stuck in really unlivable enclaves, and then they'll be amenable to a free plane ticket home, leaving behind any property that they can't lug away with them, like land or buildings. They'll just have to abandon that, and we'll be able to take that over. Apart perhaps from a few hardline warriors who are prepared to die of cholera for their weird and fetishistic god. And they're easy to deal with, those last few. So that is what I'm saying will happen. That is how I think remigration is likely to be accomplished. I think if we do that, it can be accomplished in a reasonably orderly, consensual and humane way, and without a lot of bloodshed. And that is why I think it's beneficial. Well, what are the reasons why I think that is beneficial, and more beneficial, to doing it via the coercive state? Well, I don't think I can stress enough the benefit of the remigration method that I've outlined here over the idea of doing it through a hardline remigrating government. Firstly, I'll go through my main reason is I think a hardline remigrating government, the state, whatever state it is, it will eventually end up doing it via mass killing, because the state can only operate through coercion. It only ever does things with a truncheon in one hand and a gun in the other. And when you come to the process of having to sift and sort tens of millions of people right across the country, and then to drag them out of their homes, take them to holding camps, then take them to the harbour or to the airport in order to forcibly and to be able to remigrate them. If they don't cooperate, there's going to be a lot of bloodshed there. And I think that is unnecessary. I think it will fail. I will not participate in massacre, in any form of remigration that requires massacre, for perfectly selfish reasons. The main reason being it is unnecessary and it will fail. If you're going to do it, and you shouldn't participate in that either, if that ever happens. So that's my main reason, but there are plenty of other reasons. But the first reason is I don't think we're going to elect a hardline remigrating government with the landslide mandate that it would need, because I don't think we're interested in civilizational remigration for as long as the welfare state keeps going. If the welfare state keeps going and governments are able to pretend that they're managing the economy, then I think it is the welfare state which will command our allegiance and not civilization. We will have no need for civilization. Civilization exists in order to be able to enhance our own ability to protect ourselves and survive. And if the state guarantees your survival, you don't need civilization. So as long as if the state keeps going, I think the welfare state will keep going, and I don't think we'll be that concerned to vote in a hardline remigrating government. The second reason why I think we're not likely to elect a hardline remigrating government is that we are losing the voting majority within our own land in order to be able to do so. Now, I think we will lose that long before we go down to 50% of the population. I had a chat with Steve Laws a few weeks ago, and I think his view is that the cut-off point is about 70% white British. I think it's about 65% at minimum, and we currently appear to be roughly 72 to 73%, maybe less. So we don't know, and going down by about at least 1% per year. So that's only a couple of years to go, and only a couple of years to turn it around. I just don't think we're going to turn it around and really have a revolution in our voting habits before we become such a small percentage, or too small a percentage of the population to be able to vote in a hardline remigrating government. So I don't think it's going to happen for that reason. Thirdly, as I said, I think the state is too blunt an instrument to sift and sort millions of foreigners from right across the country within their local neighbourhoods, and then to force them into holding camps and then on the boats and on the planes. I don't think the state can do that, and then it has to persuade foreign governments that to take them back. What if Pakistan or Afghanistan say, no, we're not allowing the plane to land. We're not allowing you to remigrate these people. You've got to keep them in your country. What do we do then? Do we pay them? How much is that going to cost? Okay, fourth, I think most remigration would have to happen by plane, and that's too delicate a mechanism. And the question I would ask you is, would you be happy being an air steward on a plane full of 350 very hostile, probably some of them quite crazy deportees, many of them desperate for their 72 virgins? I don't think I would. Fifth, I think it's going to be too expensive, and that matters because the more it costs, the bigger the incentive for us to relent and to become disgusted at the violence involved and to say, well, maybe diversity is our greatest strength after all, because we don't want to part with the money to do it. Letting people leave voluntarily, leaving their land and property behind, makes it profitable for us. So the more profitable it is for us, the more we're going to want to do it. It would acquire its own momentum. The cost of paying people to leave, I think that would be prohibitive. I think even if we don't have to pay people to leave, even if we don't have to incentivize them with money, I think the cost of remigration will be too high, particularly in circumstances of economic breakdown. But paying people to leave, it'll be it's a non-starter. We just won't be able to find the money. I have yet to hear a proposal for paid remigration that involves sums anywhere equal to the amount that foreigners voluntarily send home in remittances back to their home countries every year. So if they are sending that money home every year whilst being able to support themselves living here, then why will paying them a lot less money than they send home? Why will that persuade them to go? It won't. And at sixth, I think a new state system or a state system that is run by, supposing it gets run by some upstart colonel or some gang lord, that person, or some dictator, if we say, well, we can't vote our way out of this, so let's just have a dictator, that dictator is likely to have the incentive not to get rid of foreigners, because his authority relies on the fact that we perceive a danger within our own land from those foreigners, and we look to that dictator to protect us from those foreigners. He has no incentive to get rid of them. So it's a pretty good way, if we say, well, let's go for a dictatorship, it's a pretty good way to guarantee that the problem doesn't get solved. Finally, I think we would disgrace ourselves. This is what I was saying earlier. The states, the tools at the state's disposal are much too blunt. What do you do if foreigners say no and refuse to go? They say, we're not leaving. Make us. There's too many of us. We're calling your bluff. Do you just apply more and more force? How many people are you prepared to kill in order to achieve this? And how many people do you need to kill before your hired killers doing this, or your hired enforcers, get sick of the killing and become flesh sick? And there is an example playing out for us on our screens in front of our eyes as I'm speaking. If you look at what is happening in Gaza, what Israel is doing in Gaza. I should say, I don't think we should get involved in any way. I don't think they're any good guys. I think we should just stay out. There's nothing we can add. I think both sides will punish us, whichever side we help. And if I was Israeli, I think I would want to clear the Gazan population out of Gaza. And that is what I think the intention is. I think that is Israel's intention, to deal with the problem once and for all by getting the Palestinian population out of Gaza. And look at the methods they're using, and they're not working so far. Look at the bombing and devastation and destruction and death that has occurred in Gaza, and it isn't working. How far is Israel going to need to go using traditional statist methods of violence, intimidation, to get people to leave? How far will it have to go? And my guess is that if we use those same methods, we will probably do it quite a lot worse than Israel is doing it at the moment. Are you willing to do that? Watch the news. Look at your screens. See what is happening, what Israel is doing in Gaza, and just don't get outraged about it. It's nothing to do with us. There's nothing we can do to help. But use it in order to ask yourself, would I be prepared go that far, or to go 2 or 3 times further than that in order to accomplish remigration. I'll say it again. I would not be prepared to do remigration if it was through massacre. I will not participate in massacre. You shouldn't either. If that means, and because it's unnecessary, and I think there are less bloody methods available, that will be more effective, much more humane methods that will be available. It matters that we win, but future generations, they will care that we won cleanly, that we won reasonably humanely, and that we didn't disgrace ourselves. And that's what we need to do. If that makes me a weakling, a coward or a traitor or a coat merchant, then so much the better for cowards, weaklings, traitors and coat merchants. We can think through more humane and effective, orderly, consensual methods. And that is the aim, to win without violence and without expense. And the state can't do that because the only methods that the state has are violence and expense. So, right. That is why I think the sort of system that I've outlined is a good, more humane, more effective way to accomplish the remigration of millions or tens of millions of people. And what I want to look at now is why do I think it's so likely to happen? My basic reason is that if the state system falls over, I don't think you can get up another state system. I don't think you can grow a mini-state to become the overarching coercive state system, because the state system relies upon a monopoly of violence in the hands of the state. It basically says, if you live in this country, you have to be ruled by us. You have no choice. You may get the chance to cast a vote every few years, whether that has any effect or not, but you cannot escape our rule. You cannot escape our coercive force. If the state falls over, nothing else and no one else has that overarching authority and monopoly on violence. And in those circumstances, any system, any society, any polity, it will only have authority. Its authority will depend on the fact that it will get a large number of people voluntarily wanting to submit to its authority in order to be able to live together with other people we want to live together with, and in order to be able to make a living. So that's basically why I don't think the state system will get up. What I want to look at is what some other people are saying around this issue of whether the collapse will come before we vote in a remigrating government, because I think it will illustrate what I'm saying. I'm really pleased that people are starting to take what I think is my view, that we're not going to vote our way out of this problem, we're going to collapse our way out of it. That the state, the system will collapse first. And I think what people are seeing is two things. Firstly, it's the demographic window closing as our share of the population goes down and down and down. And secondly, the continued apathy of voters. When we vote, we get stupid. We go into that voting booth and we become conformist and we just vote for more of the system. More, please, do more of what you're doing to me. Probably because we want the welfare state to keep going. But it is those two things together, the closing of the demographic window and the continued apathy of voters, is causing other people to come around, I think, to what is my point of view. And what people are starting to talk about is the making of parallel societies. And I think people see these as fledgling state authorities, mini state authorities that might grow to become an overall state authority for the nation. I don't think these alternative parallel societies, I don't think they can become state authorities, because I don't think they can have this what I call the overarching authority, the ability to say, if you're in this area, you have to obey my rule and my enforcement, whatever you think. I just don't think, where does that authority come from? Who gives them that authority? And another hallmark of what people are talking about is that these fledgling, these parallel societies, these fledgling sort of state organisations, that they'll be somewhere remote, somewhere out of the way. Orania, the Ozarks, or maybe out in the country, in the Outer Hebrides. And I think that is a giveaway that people don't see the bulk of the population opting into it. I think that's that's probably a sign that people are not confident that it will happen. What I'm saying is we won't replace or set up a replacement state system or a parallel society. I think we can and will replace the current harmful defunct system with just a different system, one based on individual consent, what I would call a self-governing system. Now, what I want to look at is what three people are saying. Firstly, very briefly, Steve Laws from the conversation I had with him a few weeks ago. Then a discussion between Mark Collett and David Clues, which I thought was very good. And also a talk that was made at the PA conference by a fellow called the Woodlander. Really impressive guy. I mean, I've never met him, never spoken to him, but he talks really well. And I think he's got a sharp mind. He's one of the very impressive, of the many very impressive people that I think are starting to come into our way of thinking. And now I respect and admire the work of all of those people. I think they're all very committed, they're smart, hardworking. And I particularly like what each of them, what they're all doing to establish morale and community amongst us. So if I deal briefly firstly with Steve Laws. Now I think Steve is, I'll sing his praises again, smart guy, very energetic, very brave, tough, hard-hitting. I think he's committed to the electoral route via the Homeland Party. I think he works bravely for it. And I value the force of his advocacy and morale building. But when I had a recent discussion with him, I think he may have started to sense that society the system might well, the state system might well break down before we get the chance to vote in a nationalist government. I think he might have niggling doubts about that. And I suspect that the next few years that he looks like he's headed for, of exhorting the public to wake up, could become quite exhausting for him. I think they might be quite fruitless. So I would ask him to just bear in mind we might not vote our way out of this under the current system. We might have to wait for the system to collapse. Okay, now the next one I want to talk about is a discussion between Mark Collett and David Clues. I'll play a short 2-minute clip from that because I think this is the, from my point of view, this is the bit that's significant to what I'm saying. So bear with me a second.
The level of political corruption, the level of the system's tentacles that strangle every aspect of our lives, just unbelievable. But eventually, I actually do believe the system will collapse under its own incompetence, its own weight, and the vast number of dependents it's bringing in. And at that point, the great equalizer is, it's then a race for survival, and it's survival of the fittest. If the system were to collapse, and it was to be survival of the fittest, I have no doubts that our people would endure and emerge on top in that situation, because I believe in our people. But I believe we'd have an even better chance of emerging if we actually have a plan for that. And I suppose what we're saying is really, it's like we're on the Titanic and there's a group of people saying, quick, let's try to turn the ship around. And there's another group of people saying, let's get the lifeboats.
But what about the captain?
Now, Mark Collett's view there, which I agree with, is that collapse is coming before we vote our way out of this. And I think David Clues agrees with that. But I think Mark Collett's view is that the way to win is via some kind of parallel state, perhaps somewhere remote, maybe like an island off Scotland, or a parallel community outside, physically away from the centre of the current system. And my issue here is that I don't think it will be possible to create a parallel state authority, a new state authority, if the state collapses, because a parallel society that will only have authority insofar as individuals want to join up, because the overarching monopoly on power that the state normally has, that will go with the state. Now, the example that gets repeatedly used that I'd like to focus on to illustrate this is Orania in South Africa. Now, Orania is a stunning success, and you can look at it here. That's the Wikipedia page. It's a pretty good guide. There are quite a few guides online. You have to Google pretty hard to find out details. But that Wikipedia page, I think, if it's true, is pretty good. So it's a pretty good introduction. Now, Orania, I'll just talk a bit about it now. It's arisen out of the decline of South Africa. Afrikaners set it up in about 1990 as a place where Afrikaner culture could be preserved and Afrikaner people could live together, enjoying their own culture. And it's now got about from what I read, about 3,000 people. That's the size of a small market town, and it was deliberately set up in a resource-poor area, a scrubby area, so that people wouldn't be tempted, corrupt Africans wouldn't be tempted to take it off them. And it has been tolerated since then. Technically, the technical reason why it's been tolerated is under the South African Constitution. Minority cultures are supposed to be respected, and Afrikaners, they are a minority culture. And you get that. Other cultures have their areas, like I think you have Bantustans, where Africans can, or some African tribes can enjoy their culture. I think the main reason why I think Orania has been tolerated is in a country of rampant crime, murder, corruption, bankruptcy, and society falling apart, and with nothing working. This tiny little hamlet that does nothing except work really well. It appears to have pretty much no crime whatsoever. It relies on itself. All it does is pay taxes, quite a lot of taxes, to the South African national government, and it asks for nothing in return, except to be left alone to just be effective and successful. For instance, in South Africa, it's got the only regulation compliant rubbish tip in the whole country. So it pays its taxes, asks for nothing, and I guess the feeling is we don't need to prosecute that yet. There's plenty of other things that we, the South African rulers, have to worry about. But Orania, it only has its sort of municipal government or statist type authority because it is backed up by the South African state. It's what's called a transitional representative council, i.e. a form of local council, something like halfway between a borough council and a parish council. If the South African state broke down, Orania, it would only have authority because the people of Orania wanted to carry on living in Orania under the authority of the people who run it, that they've voluntarily chosen to live under that authority. What I mean by that is currently the Oranian authorities, they can say, if you live in our council area, if you just live within these boundaries, you have to obey our rules, that's it. And you have to pay the property charges and the minimal or the property taxes and the service charges that get imposed. And it can act in that statist way because it is effectively part of the South African state. So if the South African state falls over, people could then withdraw their cooperation. Orania would have no authority, or apart from brute physical authority, to impose itself on people who no longer wanted to be a part of it. And if you lived in Orania then, and the South African state has fallen over, you could simply say, I'm just going to move out of Orania and escape rules I don't like. Or you could simply say, I'm going to stay here, but my house and my garden and me and my family, we're no longer subject to your rules. We opt out. And people wouldn't want to do that because there's a primal need for law. We need the protection of law, but we also need to show that we are willing to obey laws so that we can be trusted by other people, enough to be able to live with other people, and enough to be able to make a living in cooperation with other people. So, but Orania would have no power to compel you to be subject to its authority if you just decided, well, I don't like Orania anymore, I just want to opt out and not obey its rules anymore. Now, I don't think that will happen. I think Orania will continue to thrive, but it can only do so on the basis of voluntary membership, which I think it will get in abundance. It won't have the South African state to enforce its authority over that area. That's what I'm saying. Now, Orania already, I think the people who set it up were very smart, very intelligent, very far-sighted. It already has a lot of features of what I would say are features of a self-government system. So it has really no tax. Apart from property taxes, there are no taxes. It pays for its basic government services by flat service charges, service fees for things like rubbish collection and water and drainage. You just pay a service fee for that. It doesn't come out of taxes. There are no other taxes. It also has the right, it will exclude people. You have to be Afrikaner to join, but also it will quite rightly exclude people on the basis of their criminal record. Again, that's under a state system. The state can't expel you. If you live or you're born within that country under that state's authority, it can punish you, but it can't expel you. Under a self-governing, voluntary type authority, the system can expel you if you've got a bad criminal record. So I would only want to join a system that excludes criminals, because I don't want criminals around me. I don't want to have to pay to be subject to their crime, thank you very much. And that's what Orania does. It has the ability to do that. And it also, another feature which I've noticed is you don't buy a house in Orania, you buy shares in houses. And that means, so it's not the buying and selling of the property. You buy and sell shares, which then allow you to live in a property, and that way, Orania is able to keep a much tighter grip on who is and isn't allowed to come in, and also it very much encourages self-sufficiency. They do jobs themselves. They club together to do the jobs themselves communally. They do not call on government. They're even quite reluctant to call on government for crime. I read that about almost the only time that it has asked for government services is when there was a student teacher who came in. He was they got him for some abuse, something abusive against the children, so they took him out to the nearest crime where the South African police dealt with him. But apart from that, they just don't take anything from government. They do it themselves, and I think Orania's success is based on that voluntary self-reliance model, not on its being a part of the South African state, not on any pretenses it might have to be a mini-state. So that's how I think Orania gets its authority. That's basically what I'm saying. No matter how successful it is, I don't think Orania will ever be a mini-state in its own right, because I don't think it will ever have that monopoly, that coercive monopoly on violence that I think the state system needs to have. Okay, next I want to refer to a speech that was made by a gentleman who goes under the name the Woodlander at the PA conference. I don't know him, I've never spoken to him, never met him. He seems to be a very impressive, intelligent and capable man, and I think what he's doing is buying up land in the countryside, which can be a way for us, the English or British, to establish a parallel society, which I think can be a basis for living for us. And what I want to do is play a little bit from a speech he made at the PA conference. So give me a second.
But we need to build a vision. We need to paint a picture of the future we do want. And when we have that vision, when we have that ideal, when we've got something that people can get behind, that positive, the most important thing is we then need to build it. We need to take it into the real world. We need to start building that alternative. Our own businesses, our own institutions. We need our own schools with our own rules. We need our own areas. We need our own land. We need our own buildings. We need our own conference centres. We need our own communities. for our own culture. And it is down to us to start building it.
One thing that really encourages me on our side is we're starting to get more and more people like him who are high IQ, intelligent and capable, and refreshingly without an expensive education. I find those people easy to admire. That encourages me. Now, two things he refers to are, again, Orania. I've been through Orania, but the return to the land movement in the Ozarks. The Ozarks movement is mainly about getting away from it all, in America, getting away from it all and returning to independent rural living within parallel societies. Let me just show you their webpage. Okay, there it is, returntotheland.org, a private membership association, and it gives its vision and its goals. You can read those out. I won't take time reading those out now. But as I say, it is basically about going out into the countryside and encouraging independent rural living, creating a parallel society. Now, it seems, from what I can tell, just from reading about it and reading it on its website, there isn't an awful lot, as much as I'd have thought, on the web about it. But it seems to run on consent alone. That seems to be the principle that it's based on. The consent of its participants without coercive authority. I can't see that it has any coercive authority. It isn't a mini state. Its only authority is that it has the voluntary membership of all its members. So I think that puts it in line with the type of self-governing voluntary type system that I talk about. Now, the common thread for people who talk about a collapse of the system and creating a new system seems to me to be that people envisage replacing the current state system with a better type of state system that starts out the back of nowhere, somewhere remote, and eventually grows and grows and takes over until we have a new state authority that's run for us. So the same type of system, just one that is better run by better people along better lines, with better principles. Now, I think that is unnecessary. I don't think you need to go out the back of nowhere, somewhere remote. I don't think we need to go out there to do it. I think the problem is not out there. I think the problem is, as usual, in us, within our own minds. And to that end, I think David Clues, in his discussion with Mark Collette, if I show you back here, that I referred to, that discussion that they had, that I just played you a bit from, in that discussion, I think that David Clues, he made some pretty smart observations. They might have seemed carping, but I don't think they are. He is a very smart guy. He's very, very quick. And firstly, I think he objected to the idea that we have to go somewhere remote in order to create a new system. And I think he's right. I think we don't want to have to go out. Most people don't want to have to go somewhere remote in order to get a better system, to live a better life. I think people want a better system here where they live, in Acacia Avenue or Bell End or Cox Square, or whatever the funny names are for where people live. I think the idea of going somewhere remote is a system of our belief that we can migrate physically away from our problems, whereas the problem is with our thinking. And I think when the state breaks down, I think people, wherever they are, within their own neighbourhoods, will rush voluntarily to enter into a new system of law in order to protect ourselves from exploding crime rates, and in order to be able to live together and make a living. I think law is a primal human need, and we will eat each other in poverty without it. So I think just where people live, people will want to take on a better system. So I don't think it's necessary to go somewhere remote. Secondly, a second objection that David Clues made is that setting up parallel societies is a recipe for scams. That's very far-sighted of him. What it puts me in mind of, there was, about 20 years ago, there was a website that was dedicated to looking at that. It was called Scamdog. You can only find it on the web archive, scamdog.com, and it was basically looking at freedom projects. And if I just go down here, looking at freedom projects where people have tried to set up free countries or free provinces where there's basically no tax man and very little, no need for law. So a lot of free trade. It tends to be a slightly anarcho-capitalist, but not exclusively. But this website was looking at those and outlining why so many of them are scams and warning people against the scams. So if I read out this little bit, recent changes in our world, especially the internet, you can see how old this website is. This is 20 years ago when the internet was fun, yeah? Have made freedom far more viable than it has been in a long time. In this climate, a number of very interesting projects have sprung up. The problem is some of them are fraudulent and some of them are simply overly hopeful, unrealistic and doomed to failure. And he outlines some of the scams and some of the naivety that goes on. You can look at that website on the web archive for yourselves. I'm not going to outline the projects. I know nothing about them. I don't want to get sued for libel, for libelling them. So, but I suspect he's right that those freedom projects, let's set up our society somewhere else, let's go a long way away and set up a new utopia, that I think he's right that many of them do fail and are fraudulent. I don't think it's necessary to go out the back of nowhere. I think we can do it and people will want to do it within our own neighbourhoods. Okay. So I think this is coming. I think we are going to see a collapse of the state system. I think we are living at the beginning of the end of the age of the state. The state is not going to survive, and when it goes down, I don't see any way that it can get up again. I think people are starting to realise it will break down, but what I think most of us, a lot of people don't realise yet, is that if it goes down, it won't get up again. I think people think, well, we can let it collapse, and then we'll get up our own good state system that will be run by good people along good lines. No, wrong answer. I don't think that's going to happen. When the monopoly power, the monopoly on violence that the state has goes, I don't think anyone's going to be able to. People will try to get it up. They'll try to get that brute force up again. I don't think they'll succeed. Now, I think this is significant. What I'm talking about, I'm trying to explain the nuts and bolts. It gets a bit technical sounding, but the significance is profound between the current state system that we have, the overarching coercive state, and a voluntary self-governing society that I'm putting forward. I think that, the difference is, I'll just outline a few of them. The first one is you don't get a taxman within a voluntary self-governing state system, because when you start taxing people, if people are only there voluntarily and you tax them too much, they will leave and they'll just opt out and they'll join another system that isn't going to tax them so much. And so if you don't have a welfare state, then you will tend to get, if you don't have the taxman, you won't have a welfare state, but what you will have is rocketing inventiveness and prosperity, because the risk-reward ratio will go through the roof for entrepreneurs, so you'll get a really very prosperous, very inventive society. And the second thing is you can simply expel people if they're bad news on your society. You can exclude them, particularly on the basis of criminal records. And I think criminals will simply get excluded. Good, criminals should be excluded from society. I would have no compunction about doing that. I don't want criminals coming into my society, sharing my neighbourhood, committing crimes, and then I've got to spend money in the form of service charges to get up courts, jails and policemen to go and chase those criminals down and prosecute and imprison them. I just don't want them in the first place. And so I think that is another feature of a self-governing type system. I think a third feature is you can't impose fiat currency. Under a self-governing system that people can opt in and out of, where you don't have an overarching monopoly of violence, you can't force people to use your printed money. In those circumstances, I think gold will become currency, and gold tends to make societies very much more moralistic and culturally forceful, because the focus is not on consumption and speculation. It's on value that can be produced here and now. And it tends to inculcate a sort of depth of value when you use gold, and that tends to get expressed in cultural ways. So the decadent cultural desert that we have at the moment, I think that will go. So what I'm describing here, this move to a voluntary self-governing state, I think it should therefore it should be viewed with optimism, not with the panic and confusion, the sense of the sky falling in because the welfare nose tube, it might get ripped out of our heads. Good, it should be ripped out of our heads. It's no good. It does us harm. Do you want to live in a prosperous society where you can live by your own means, or do you want to live in a poor society where you have to stand in line for welfare, where the man with the upper class accent tells you to stand? So I know which I prefer, and I think it is coming. If as I think, this system, we get some kind of economic breakdown. So I hope, what I hope is, I'm hoping to sort of encourage this debate onward a bit, to get people to consider this, because I think people are starting to move in people are starting to reject this rejection of the idea that we might vote our way out of this. I think this is people starting to move along the line. And I think that's a good thing. And I hope those of us realizing that collapse is more likely to come before we vote our way out of this problem, I hope these people, more of us will start to recognize that once the state system goes down, it is not getting up again. Thank you.